Bonjour mesdames.
Hello,
Bonjour Thomas qui est à
ladies and gentlemen. Hello to Thomas, who is with us remotely. It's 9 o'clock. I know we're all full of energy after a wonderful Cham evening that only the organisers of Cham could have organised. I'm very delighted to share this moment with you. This is a very important theme in the era of healthcare and for our different institutions and especially for our patients. So to be certain that we're all wide awake, we're going to, before we start talking about our subject, I'd like to ask you a very quick question in less than 2 minutes. I'd like you to answer. I'll start with you, Anne-Sophie. When you talk about active life, you talk about an active life with lots of emotions, with the sharing, with meeting people in Chamonix, for example, and an active life in terms of working and a career. So it's a philosophical question. I'm not asking you to write an essay, but what is active life? What does that mean to you? I'll first just like to say hello to everyone. I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me. I'm very pleased that the theme of active life and professional life is becoming part of healthcare forums. For me, active life and work stoppage is all we need to say. We have two worlds, the world of healthcare and the world of work, which are very separate, with consequences which are negative for the patients who lose their work and lose their income, and for employers who lose their talents, and which have to deal with disorganization and level of absenteeism, which is very high, and also problems for the social security and our system of social protection, which we often forget, including in the healthcare system. So when I think of active life, what I think it has to be more and more part of the world of healthcare, and same way healthcare has to be more and more part of the world of work and employment. And these two worlds should be more connected for the benefit of everybody. Monique,
your role within your organization, so do you agree about such definition of active life? So what does it mean for you?
Yes, I do. So thanks for having me also, and good morning, everyone. When I think about active life, I think, because of COVID, the distinction between what's work and what's life is much greyer. And so really trying to find a way to ensure that everybody is fulfilled and gets the best from life, I think is really important. So whether that's because they have some health condition or whether it's just because there's pressures of other life with other commitments outside the workplace, all of those things are really important. So for us at Novo Nordisk, we're really keen to try and get the best from our people, and that means understanding how to balance work and life together.
Thank you. Great. Thomas, vous êtes à distance. Je pense que vous entendez. Quels sont les... Bonjour Thomas.
Thomas, you're with us. What are the founding elements for you as an introduction of, give us a definition of active life, if you can. Well, very quickly, you've already started to talk about the different aspects. We all have in mind that when you talk about active life, it's thinking about work as a factor for personal development and accomplishment, and also a way of developing into collective group with importance of human contact, the definition of the World Health Organization, who talks about that. If we go a little further, we can see that behind that there are many subjects to do with the balance between work and health, prevention of burnout, also the role of sport in health. So the active life for me means you have a life which is somebody who's in good health, and there are many challenges involved as well. We've already talked about integrating sick people into the world of work, and we've talked about prevention of professional dropping out, people dropping out of their job, and we'll talk about that as well, I think. And as already been said, it's certainly true that for health insurance, if you can have employees in good health, it's important for their health, and of course, it's also important for our long-term sustainability. Thank you, Thomas. We'll come back to the points about people losing their jobs and the work stoppage with you in a moment. Alice, you're the world champion of karate. I'll be very kind. Don't hit me, please. So what are the components of your active life? Yes, hello, everybody. For me, active life is a reflection of our personality and professional life and your personal life as well. What we are as an individual goes beyond an active life, which is a busy, full life. It's a reflection of who we are as an individual through the actions and decisions we take, and it's a question of balance between personal life, professional life, and I think this balance is often leans too much one way very often. That's why it's important to have an active life and a professional life. Thank you for that introduction, everybody. We'll now get into the heart of the subject. I'll start with you, Anne-Sophie. You had cancer at 30 years old, you have had 3 children. You were convinced of the power of integration. Thanks to the world of work, you have an important definition of the idea of an employee who is a patient. This is a concept present at the exhibition dedicated to cancer presently at the City of Sciences in Paris. It's rather an unusual definition. For you, are in employee and patient two things that are in opposition? Yes. Very often they are in opposition far too much. I think it is a very urgent matter to take action to better reconcile professional life with health. Very simply, to be very direct, we have to talk about the question of meaning that the Minister mentioned yesterday evening. What does it mean if you're treating people and caring for people and improving their health level of health, if you don't allow them to be an active part of society, which the patients want to be? It's a constitutional right to be an active participant in society. Especially as Mr. Fatoum was saying just now, we have a subject of sustainability of our system in the medium and long term. Today, sickness and at work means you are going to lose your job. We have figures with cancerology, oncology, figures between 3 and 5 years after the diagnosis. 1 person out of 3 loses their work, loses their job. If we're not able to reconcile sickness and work, they're not going to survive. So we're very lucky today to have a very broad panel of employers from the world of healthcare. What does it mean for an employee or a nurse, for example, in a hospital, or somebody who is responsible for public affairs in a lab, if they get up every morning to make progress in healthcare and treatment, when one day they or one of their colleagues or loved ones has a serious disease, they have an employer who is not able to support them and will not enable them to continue having this this active professional life. It's very important and essential for them. There's a hole in the racket. Yes, there's a hole in the racket, I think, definitely, yes. But the good news, and we'll come back to this later, is that there are very simple solutions that do exist to make this possible. Thank you, Monique.
A lot about the challenges related to flexibility and trust. And I know that Novo Nordisk, you have a strong commitment on this and a strong definition of flexibility. So can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I can. So we had been looking at workplace flexibility long before COVID-19. When COVID hit, obviously, we had to really change the way that we considered this. And so we came up with 4 principles, 4 core beliefs around workplace flexibility. So the first one is that every employee has the right to flexibility. That if they have a job that can be done from a different location, we should discuss with them, what's the right balance on working from somewhere else, not necessarily in the office. The second core belief is that we believe that getting together and being connected to one another, developing relationships, is really crucial for our culture. And so we don't want to be one of those companies that says, work from anywhere, we're going to close all our offices, we don't want to see you. That's not us. Yeah. The next one is that we think it's a leadership responsibility to agree the right level of flexibility. And that means it's important for a leader and an employee to talk about what makes sense, to recognise that no one size fits all. And that certain jobs, if you work on a production line, you can't do that from home. But there are other elements of flexibility that could be possible. And then the last one is that we don't believe that it's flexibility at the cost of business. We need to be able to do the jobs. So with that said, we have worked with our organisations in the different countries, also in France, to look at what are the right kind of arrangements on flexible working for our employees. And that's a little bit different because we don't say, and it looks like this. Yeah. It's within this frame, you have to show up on these days. It's much more flexible. It's more about measuring the outputs and the behaviours rather than, be in the office Monday to Wednesday or something.
Thank you very much. And Alizé, on a le point de vue d'Anne-Sophie.
We have the point of view of Anne-Sophie and of Monique as an employer. Of course, we would like to hear a little more about your story. You had a dream as a little girl, which was to be in the police. Can you tell us about the different stages that you went through? And the different challenges that you experienced? Yes. I'm a diabetic type 1 ever since I was a teenager. At 18 years old, the doctor gave me a sort of routine checkup, and they found the levels were rather high. And a specialist said, you'll become diabetic, but we don't know when. So I kept taking blood tests, and then they told me, OK, you've become diabetic now. And diabetic type 1. And the questions about my career quickly evaporated because I started going to organize myself and make sure I continue being a high-level athlete. I did want to enter the police. I'd always wanted to be in the police ever since I was a little girl. So I entered the competitive exam. I took the exam and the physical examinations. The physical tests were fine, as you can imagine. No problem there with the physical test. I was called Zene Legaya, so I was fine with the physical tests. The oral exam was fine. And the last step was the medical exam. Everything was fine up to then. And then I received a dossier at home and with questions I had to answer about my medical history. And then I had a question, are you diabetic? Yes or no? So I thought to myself, am I diabetic type 1 or type 2? I wanted to find out a bit more. So what do I do? You were hesitating. It didn't take me long. I talked to my parents, and as soon as I found I was diabetic, I didn't want to hide it. So I ticked the yes box. I sent the dossier, I went to the medical exam, took the tests, and then I had the checkup with the doctor. He said it's great to have people who are so highly motivated. You're a high-level athlete. You train every day, so you're in great shape physically. And he went through the dossier at the same time with me, and he was looking at my dossier, and he said, you're diabetic. And I said, yes, diabetic type 1. But I'm very well controlled, no problem. And he said, well, this is a problem. From my point of view, I would like to say that you are accepted, but there are laws that prevent me from doing that. So what we're going to do is you'll have to wait. I'll ask the head physician of the National Police to ask for his opinion, and I'll come back to you. So the medical visit that should have lasted half an hour lasted 2 hours. So I waited. We couldn't get hold of the person. So I went home. I went back home with a piece of paper, and it said accepted under reservation. So I wasn't completely certain that I was accepted. I went back home. I got a phone call from this physician who said to me, I've had the head physician. From him, it's categorically no, without any further explanations. So that was very tough for me. That's where sport helped me a great deal, because when you're a high-level athlete, you have to accept defeat as well. So I thought, what am I going to do? I did everything I could to be accepted, and something was out of my control. I couldn't do anything about it. And so I thought I just have to work harder. But here it was something else. I couldn't get around it just by working harder. It was not something I could take control of. So I carried on with my studies. I received a letter saying I could appeal against the decision. This appeal was rejected, and then another letter saying I could make another appeal to the administrative tribunal, which I did with the help of a lawyer from the French Diabetic Association. And meanwhile, you were continuing to be winning all these championships as a karate champion. I was continuing world champion, European champion, French champion. Apparently, I wasn't fit enough to get a job as a policewoman. So I got time to finish my studies. I got the decision for my bill. So I took the test. I still didn't have the. Yes, I got I wanted to become an SNCF athlete. And so I took the medical test for the SNCF, the railway company in France. So I thought, okay, I'm going to become an SNCF athlete. So what happened then? Okay, so I received a letter to invite me to this medical visit to become an SNCF athlete, and it said, don't drink a cup of toffee, a cup of tea, and don't have any sugar, and there must be, give me a blood test. So I took the test. I looked at the checkup with the physician. He went through my dossier, and he said, oh, you're diabetic. I said, yes. Oh, well, it's not going to be possible then. So then I really started to I started to collapse internally. I'd been refused twice now. To have a job that I really wanted to have. So it was very, very tough. Then I found another position, thanks to my professional qualifications. But nevertheless, it was difficult for me to do that. Then there was a decision from the appeal to the administrative tribunal, which said I could enter the police force because I hadn't been judged on my real capacity to actually do the job in question. So I actually won in the end. It was a great victory for me because it'll be case law for the future. So now a bill has now been proposed to enable people who have chronic disease to be able to obtain this kind of position. So we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel for people like me. Yes, thank you very much for sharing that testimony with us. It's very useful. I imagine, Sophie, you'd like to react to that. It seems to me absolutely crazy that this kind of thing can happen. We don't highlight the expertise of patients in their fight against the disease. Here, this is a great example of what you've talked about and illustrated about people fighting against cancer, etc. I'd like to say well done, first of all. You are a fantastic example, Alizé, of everything that all of the sick people are able to do, and to highlight their skills and qualities, and that you can win out in the end. Despite the difficulties with your disease, you've had a very difficult experience that you went through with your fantastic skills, including in areas, for example, you went very close to the judicial area, for example. I think we should consider this as a way of illustrating not only the difficulties but the costs, but also it helps us to look together how we can promote the way people experience their disease for themselves, and to highlight their professional skills and to highlight the importance of their professional career plan. Because if we have in these teams a person who has so determined and so committed and has so much energy as you do, and a capacity to step back and be objective and to coordinate and cooperate with your environment, which is extremely diverse, it's a great chance for us, for employers, to have somebody like that. They could have lost the opportunity to be able to employ you. That would have been absurd. I agree with what Monique was saying earlier. It's quite simple, in fact. Employers have something they have to do, which is to enable people to talk about this subject, to say to the employee this subject of disease, which is not part of the world of work at the moment. You can't be ill if you're at work. Here, with us, you can talk about it, and we're going to talk about your needs, which will be expressed by the people concerned, and also by the teams. By doing that, we can find solutions, and that is why, and it's to answer this demand from the employers and also from the patients, who I've met very frequently in the corridors of hospital, of the Gustave Hospital for many years. That's why I decided to create a club of managers called Cancer at Work that brings together business leaders who employ people who have chronic diseases, who engage them in action to help their employees on the basis of the needs that have been expressed. And more recently, I've also decided to create a startup of sick people called, with our teams, we also have very many different pathologies, and we create tools for employees to help them reconcile sickness and work. The last one is called Alex. It's a 2.0 coach, which was adopted by Social Security for the own employees of the Social Security. A nice transition there. Thomas, you can tell us about the subject of work stoppage. You're an expert in that area. Would you like to react to what Elise was telling us about? Yes, it's very touching and very moving. And when you are running a public service, I have to admit that it's a shame that we have to have that kind of people have to go through that kind of thing to be able to obtain what they want to get. I was also reminds me of another combat a number of us have been through, concerning access to credit, to bank loans for people with chronic diseases, and the right to have your disease forgotten so that you can obtain bank loans. This is a situation that has improved a great deal here in France, and it's very important for the sick to be able to have an active life. If you are unable to borrow money, it's very difficult to have an active life. So it's very interesting to hear Alice's story and also Sophie's commitment as well. So this is something where we're also making progress. So we're moving forward. Things are changing. Thank you. And I'd like to make a rather abrupt statement now and talk about current affairs, which is work stoppage. When we look at work stoppage, 25% suffering from chronic disease lose their job. Whenever 1 in 3 lose their job, is work stoppage the right solution? Is in every case? We know it's a subject is a subject of discussion at the moment. What's your point of view? If you could share that with us. There's nobody's listening, just to me, apart from me. Nobody else is listening. Don't worry. No, seriously. We have to say that work stoppage is part of the way that the health insurance manages work. When it was created in 1945, the idea was the workers who were in a factory, if they are unable to go to the factory or work in the fields, they would be given money. So for us, it's absolutely a very important mission to be able to give this substitution income if people are unable to work. So that's important. For us, it's a founding principle of the Social Security. Then, if people stop work, it's often because of a medical condition which prevents them from working. It's often the work of the physicians and prescriptors to make sure that this state of health does not enable, does prevent people from working. That's why we felt that we felt that teleconsultation would be possible solution. One of our missions is something we forget. There's not just a question of control in health insurance, there's also a question of support and support for physicians and prescriptors. I'd like to talk about an initiative we launched before the summer to propose a MOOC, but not a top-down, not with a top-down approach. It's a real MOOC to support physicians when they're prescribing work stoppages, how we can help the patients, what are the references, how do we talk about the subjects of burnout and mental health. We have little less than 2,000 physicians have subscribed. We hope there will be more in the future. And we provide them with many different films and materials to explain to them what therapeutic part-time working is. A lot of physicians don't know about it, or they think it's very complicated administratively. How do I do that with the company and the occupational doctor? But that's one fundamental tool, and we really want to continue with this, above and beyond, of course, the controls, because occasionally we realize the work stoppages are not completely justified. The last part of our action is with the health insured citizens to make sure we do everything we can to make to make sure the situation does become too long-term, so that we can intervene sufficiently early for the duration of work stoppage not to be too long, and try to make sure we can do everything we can to get people back to work as soon as possible, if possible. And also, if in the long term that's not possible, then we can then adapt accordingly. That's the role of health insurance body. We also have social assistants who are there, social workers who are there to help, and they're there to provide an interface with the world of work, to support, control, provide information and raise awareness. All of these are policies that the health insurance body tries to implement. I give you, there are 13 million work stoppages in 2021. 5 million people benefited from work stoppage in 2021. These are figures that are very high. This is partly because of COVID, of course. I'd like to say hello to Stéphane Julie, who is working with us on this area. It's a very big subject. Sophie, of course, communication is very important. Yes, communication is important, both at the level of physicians who increasingly, I know we ask people to do a lot of the things. They have to take account of the professional life of patients and be able to tackle the subject as early as possible. It's an opportunity for the patient to have a dialogue with their employee and to adapt the working conditions to have more flexibility, which Monique was talking about earlier. And in the same way in companies, including in the healthcare sector, and first and foremost in the healthcare sector, I think companies in the healthcare sector have an important role to play. It's an opportunity to open up a dialogue and communicate, anticipate. These are very simple things, in fact. We can, in fact, the first 2 and 3 days are very important after a disease has been detected. Monique, I'd like to come back to you.
Your global vision and your wish to develop a unique Novo Nordisk culture all around the world. So how do you see the French implementation of what you are seeing? Because we know that French is quite complicated sometimes ecosystem. So how do you see the French implementation of what we're seeing right now?
Well, in Novo Nordisk, we try and drive this concept of being a sustainable business and a sustainable employer. Yeah. We've got 3 pillars, which are about being inclusive and diverse, being a talent incubator, and being an employer fit for the future. And many of the things that have been discussed just now about how you respond to some of these crises that people have to go through in life, and whether you make that worse or you try and play your role to help people get through it, I think very much fits in the bucket of being an employer fit for the future. In Novo Nordisk in France, we're actually working on these topics. It's kind of something that was on the agenda before we had COVID-19, and it's things like how we connect with the employees, how we understand what's important to them. I think it was just mentioned about, if you're sick, in the past you couldn't get a mortgage. We have a range of flexible benefits for our employees. So we don't say, our contract with you is just for pay and bonus. We have other benefits to do with healthcare, pensions, life insurance, all sorts of different things where, we listen to the employees and what's important to them, specifically if they can't get some of these things in the open market, we're paying more as a company on these type of benefits to help our employees ensure that they get the things which they need. There's lots of other things that we do too. I mean, this thing about inclusion, I think, is really important. I think some companies think about diversity inclusion as, how many women and how many men. And of course, it is that. But it's also about how do you make sure that everybody has an opportunity to contribute. And, there'll be different times in our lives where we can contribute more or less, depending on other things that are going on. So, I think we actually have this social contract with our employees to figure out what's the best way to allow that contribution from everyone. I think we are a company that we're Scandinavian, so I think our articles of association is built on, we call it the triple bottom line. So of course it's the financials, of course it's the shareholders, it's the society, and it's the patient. But it shouldn't be at the one cost is more important than the others. It needs to work in harmony, and that's what we try to do. And it's not always perfect, but I think we have this aim. We've got a consensus type culture, so we actually talk about things, difficult things. We listen to the employees. We try and respond with what could we do to get closer and meet you in the middle.
Alizé, quand vous entendez Monique nous parler d'inclusion,
and you hear Monique talking about inclusion, the harmony between the employees and employers, and motivating them to contribute to the company, what would you like to say? What are the ideas we could think of, we could put in place rapidly, so that this obstacle course that you've had to go through could become easier? For me, inclusion is very important. For somebody who has a chronic disease, it's important for them to be able to enjoy life and their professional and private life. It's a balance we have to try to achieve. I would have liked people to ask me more, to spend more time talking about my disease, to consider me as a person, if my results were good or not. When you're diabetic, you're alone faced with your treatment. I have to take decisions every day concerning my life. And I would like people to be more interested in that kind of things, look at my medical results, and to realize that people who have a chronic disease have to have a strong character. I'm talking about diabetes, 24 hours a day, there's no break. You have to be strong mentally. You have to get up every day and say, okay, I'm going to look after myself today. Sometimes there are days where you don't feel so good. I'm comparing that with high-level sport. Sometimes you don't necessarily want to go to train, but you have to. It's a little bit the same with diabetes. Sometimes, some days you think, it would be so nice if I didn't have to do all this. And communication is very important, therefore. There are several things. Another thing is that there are these laws that need to be changed, and also how we can help physicians in the decisions they make. Because for the police, the physician who was with me wanted me to be considered fit for work, but he wasn't able to do that because of the laws. And before we hand on to Thomas, Sophie, could you tell us a little bit about the expertise you've developed with Fighting for Cancer Association, which I think is very interesting. Fighting Cancer is an association we created a few years ago, which it is to symbolize the skills and the qualities gained in the experience of this disease, working with LinkedIn, with a skill which is fighting cancer, which is concerns people who are sick, also with the participation of managers and caregivers as well, and people working in the world of work who are confronted by the situation. For us, it was very important to do this, to change the way people see things. We need to take a step to one side and look at disease and sick people in a different way. We are still fit for work. We are still able to create companies. I'm a company director myself. For the last 10 years, I created 15 jobs, which isn't huge, of course, compared to international groups, but I've made my contribution. We are capable of contributing to the system. It's absolutely vital for us, but also for the system itself. Because if the system doesn't support us and doesn't enable us to work, then tomorrow we'll no longer have the means to treat people. And also I'd like to add something. I'd like to react to what Alizé and Monique were saying. When you're an employee in a company, you are lucky enough to meet a young lady such as Alizé. She's an example, a role model. You're an example of determination, pugnacity, and resilience. That's a very fashionable word, but it's true. It also makes people, other employees in a similar situation, to come to work because you are fighting every day to go to work. And when you have an employee like Monique, all of the people in the company who are well and who see that sick employees are not Kleenex employees, but the employees doing everything they can to help them to continue working and making their contribution, every morning they want to come to work as well, for the company as well, and that changes everything. How many people today have activated the Fighting Cancer expertise in LinkedIn? Several thousand people have activated it. The Cancer at Work, the Disease at Work, these are French initiatives. We are starting our international deployment. Well done, that's great. Thomas, CANAM has commitments to make, which are very strong to prevent people dropping out of work with coaching systems and very strong links with companies who often don't know what to do when they're faced with this kind of situation. Is it a question of our capacity to get the public sector to work better and the private sector, to get them both to work together? But is that maybe a solution, to get the two sectors to work together? Of course, it's a fairly obvious solution. Yes. It's not that easy. You talked about the French ecosystem, as you were saying earlier. It can be a bit complicated, it's true, but our job is to overcome these difficulties. As you said, we are very committed to prevention of professional dropout. This is identified either by investigations of our databases or by conversations with physicians and patients. And this justifies the fact that we have to be very attentive in our individual support for people to help them return to work. We have built up processes and support systems for individuals and coordination between the doctor from the health insurance company, the occupational doctor, and the family doctor. We have tried to integrate these into a platform, and since the law last year on healthcare at work, we are trying to strengthen the link with services who are in charge of healthcare at work, and we do have a responsibility to work in this area. They have to be operational in these areas. If something is being deployed, I'd also like to say on paper it works, but in certain examples it works. It works in several thousand cases, but the big challenge, and this is our mission, is to scale up. How do we do this more systematically so that whenever somebody has been in a work stoppage for 6 months or a year or 18 months, when we can see that we could help them to return to work if we provide them with the support they need, we need to be able to provide them with all the aid and support they need, but in reality, it's complicated. Because the culture of a family doctor or a company doctor or a doctor from a health insurance agency, they all have different approaches. So it's difficult to get them to work together. The private sector and the public sector of health sector are difficult to get them to work together. But there's more and more discussion and a very common determination on both sides to do so. So it's true that the subjects are difficult sometimes. Making sure we have confidentiality. We have the respective roles of the employer and of the company doctor and the patient. We're going to continue working hard in this area because, as already been said by Monique, it's a major subject for healthcare. It's very important to improve the health of employees. We're working on talking about work. This is the theme of our roundtable. Could we think maybe we could go further in anticipation so that companies have a real role to play in terms of prevention of aging, perhaps? We know there's a lot of challenges in all of the industries represented here today. They have a difficulty retaining their talented people, and we know these are important subjects for the new generation. Should companies tomorrow make a stronger commitment to prevention of aging and put health care in the center, make it a central concern of them, not just the question of patients returning to work, but also before that as well? Companies haven't waited for us to help them do that. Monique has mentioned that. She talked about the importance of human capital and investment in prevention. We know that's important. What we want to do at the Health Insurance Agency is to help them with that. Let me take one example. We also manage systems can do with occupational diseases, the risk of burnout, and psychosocial risks as well. At the moment, we're deploying what we call mental health first aid. This is something, a concept that came from Australia with mental health first aid. How can we identify people who might have problems in terms of their mental health in the world of work? We think that in the world of work, our mental first aiders can help companies to train people in companies to be these mental health first aiders. We also know that with the complementary insurance funds, we can also work better with them because a lot of complementary insurance funds work with companies and they are more agile than we are. They have more contact with companies than we do to see how we can define common actions with them. This is subjects we need to work with them on, because in that way we'll be able to raise awareness and make sure everybody's feeling well in terms of their mental health as well. Monique, we have 4 minutes left. I have one last question.
Like you, who has strong commitment for patients with diabetes and obesity. So can you just tell us more about the concrete solution to help patients sometime beyond their treatment and their overall care pathway, including, of course, the return to active life, but not only?
Yeah. So Novo Nordisk is committed to doing work on prevention. So a tangible example of that in France is in Strasbourg, where we have this project which is in partnership with the public sector and the private sector, the university hospital, the mayor. And this is about helping children with obesity, but also vulnerable patients with type 2 diabetes. So in Strasbourg, we've helped 1,200 patients, and it's through education, it's through diet, exercise, cooking, growing fresh produce, helping people think about what are the things that they can do to help themselves. And back to Thomas's comment there about what other things can employers do. This is what we do with patients, but we make it the business of our employees to understand more about the patients. So hearing stories like yours about things which have happened, stigma, real difficulties that you have to overcome. I think that's really important for our employees also to think about their role in changing society, public policy, and so on. Yeah.
Merci. Il nous reste 2 minutes.
We have 2 minutes left. It's gone very quickly. I'm sure we'll be back next year. A few words of conclusion, perhaps? Sophie, a few words of conclusion. First of all, in a very concrete way, you work with companies and patients every day without having 3, 4 or 5 year plans. What should we activate right now to get rid of these holes in the racket, which are rather big at the moment? First of all, I'd like to come back to Cham again. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you, Guy. If we want to come back to Cham, if we want to continue caring for patients, and when we want our children to benefit from this wonderful system we have in France, we have to take action very quickly. I'd like to encourage all of the employees who are present, all of the physicians and healthcare professionals who are here, to join this Cancer at Work platform to talk about their practice so that we can move further forward more quickly with the tools we present, because also of supporting jobs for people who are sick. I think there are 3 simple pillars in health and work. It's raise awareness and communication to make sure that everybody knows what's happening. It's training and providing individualized and collective support, because it would be a mistake to only work with individual patients and not all of the people around them as well. Thank you very much. We can all activate Fighting Cancer on LinkedIn. All of you. You have no excuse. You can all do it. I'm counting on you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alizé, Monique, and Sophie, and Thomas. Thank you very much, everybody.